Nature WWF, and their and their session is entitled Notice Nature. I'm going to invite Arabella onto the stage, who's going to be hosting this session, and please give her a massive round of applause. Thank you so much.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a really exciting things to tell you about today, and actually we also are going to be going on a little field trip at the end. So this isn't just listening. I'm going to get you to do something. So what have we got coming up? Oh, there we go. Whoops. Okay, so I've got some fantastic speakers for you, and we've got some of our volunteers from our Leaders of Change program as well, who are going to take you out and about around Expo searching for nature. We're going to go and find some wildlife right here at Expo. We're going to do a bio blitz. But I'm going to hand you over now to our Director General, Laila Abdulatif, and she's going to give you some inspirational words about why it's so important that we take care of nature.
Thank you, Arabella. All right. Oops, get stuck a little bit. Hello, everybody, and welcome, and thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to kick off to frame a little bit the context of why we're here, and hopefully also share a little bit of an announcement of what's to come. But I think to start off with, a lot of you, I'm sure, are also wondering, at a time when our world is suffering from climate change, conflict, food and water insecurity, and overconsumption of resources, it can be very difficult to understand why we must also prioritize nature, biodiversity, and species, and why we need them to create a more sustainable, stable world. The key thing to realize, though, is that nature and species do not exist in isolation. They are all interconnected. We are all interconnected. A single species interacts with others in ways that produce multiple benefits to people, like clean air, clean water, and clean and healthy soils for efficient food production. And these are the ecosystem services that we all rely on for our everyday survival. Since 1970s, the world has witnessed a 69% decline in global populations of mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and much of this loss is caused by habitat destruction, it's caused by climate change, which is why we're all here today. And as nature reminds us, it is not able to cope with the amount of immense stress that we are placing on it, affecting our natural habitats and affecting the species that reside within these habitats. And what we tend to forget now and then is that humans are also a species. We're all here and we're a species too. And the loss of biodiversity, the loss of nature impacts us all tremendously, limiting nature's ability to support us whilst reducing our resilience. Nature, however, is also known to be one of the greatest allies against climate change. We don't always realize this, and every time I say this fact, it gives me a little bit of goosebumps. But every single tree and plant on Earth has made its entire body wholly out of carbon. And it stores a significant amount of carbon dioxide in its soils, acting as that carbon sink, reining in climate change. We must protect nature so that nature can protect all of the species on this planet, including us. But what does that mean exactly? It's sometimes hard for people to truly understand. To overcome this, we need to notice nature, and that is really why we're all here today, because we know the role that it truly plays. A large part of environmental conservation is learning about our species, learning about our plants, our animals, conducting biodiversity surveys to really understand how many are there, where are they threatened, what are they, and how can we prevent the threats that nature and our biodiversity is facing in our backyard. We take these insights into consideration to inform those conservation strategies and environmental policies before we enter into the monitoring phase. But then we ask ourselves another sort of questions, another set of questions. Are these interventions working? Is nature recovering? Are populations of species increasing? By doing this, we aim to ensure that strong, healthy ecosystems and habitats are thriving, and they continue to provide us with those services that we rely on for our survival. But why is this relevant to us in the UAE? We may live in the desert, but the country is full of life. If you are out in the Arabian Gulf Sea on the sparkling blue waters and snorkeling beneath, you might catch sight of dolphins. Yes, it's rare, but they are here. You might catch sight of sea turtles, of sharks, all species that we actually work on as Emirates Nature WWF, and also dugongs. And all of these species and animals are grazing on our underground meadows of seagrass. And not a lot of people are aware of this, but the UAE has the second largest population of dugongs in the entire world. Across the coastal lagoons and islands that also dot the UAE shoreline, to the Rocky Mountains to the east, are hotspots for unique biodiversity, for diverse habitats that are sheltering thousands of animals, thousands of species that are threatened by our warm temperatures. They're threatened by our arid landscapes. They're threatened by our high saline conditions, yet they've found a way to adapt in this harsher environment, in this place that we all call home. Animals like the Arabian oryx and snakes, many beasts like lizards and scorpions and toads and water-wise plants like date palms, acacia, moringa, or the shua tree. Life is abundant, even in unexpected places. The flowers that adorn urban green areas and parks, even the ones that we're around here today, and attract those precious pollinators, such as our bees and insects, who are essential for urban biodiversity to thrive. Collecting information about wildlife, about marine life, as well as their habitats, and monitoring these trends, this is a huge job. It really is a huge job, and there's only so many environmental scientists out there in the world. However, everyone can contribute towards growing this pool of valuable scientific data, working alongside environmental scientists as citizen scientists. By mobilizing collective action, we can learn and achieve so much more. And we can do it quickly. And in fact, we're already doing this through our Leaders of Change program in the UAE. Working with esteemed partners, Emirates Nature WWF has been building these pathways for everyone in society to be a part of this movement. And this is through the Leaders of Change, but it's also through a community that has now become 4,000 members strong of corporate, government, youth, individuals who are ensuring that there are thousands of boots on the ground for environmental conservation and thousands of minds co-creating solutions. Notice Nature is one of the landmark initiatives of the Leaders of Change program. It's newly been innovated and funded by our partner Mushrek. I have the music behind me to celebrate this announcement. And we're driving the way to encourage everyone to notice the many remarkable species and habitats that surround us, appreciating their value, and helping us scientifically document how to best protect and restore nature in the UAE. I invite you all here today to join the movement, become a leader of change, and find out how you can contribute to climate and nature goals as citizen scientists through the latest Notice Nature initiative in partnership with Mushrek. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank my mini ones here who've been watching me do the speech just now. Yay. Inspiration for everything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laila. We'll pass that on to someone else. Cool. Wow. Okay. So, very, very inspiring words there from Laila. I think what's super important for me is for us all to remember that we are nature. It's not that we're separate. It's not that we're some sort of engineered machine. We are animals. We need to be in our natural habitat, and we need to protect our natural habitat, and it supports us. So if we think about all the things that nature gives us, right? If we think about every breath that you're breathing, that oxygen was made by a plant. Everything I'm wearing, cotton, whatever else I've got going on here, that's also come from the ground, or it's come from nature. The iron in my blood was at one point in the earth, right? I am nature. And I want to share with you now a poem. It's one of my favorite poems that really brings that message home to me. So hopefully the clickers. Ooh. Hello. Could you advance the slide, please? Thank you. There we go. Okay. So the water in your body is just visiting. It was a thunderstorm a week ago. It will be the ocean soon enough. Most of your cells come and go like the morning dew. We are more weather pattern than stone monument. Sunlight on mist, summer lightning. Your choices outweigh your substance. There you go. You used to be a thunderstorm. Did you know that? So I think it would be really nice to take a minute to just thank nature for all that she does for us. Maybe you want to just have a little moment with this beautiful music going on in the background to think about all that you receive from nature. Maybe you have some feelings of guilt. Perhaps there's stuff you want to apologize for. Perhaps there's something that gives you hope. Take a minute, just a few seconds, to just really reflect on that. I've got a video, hopefully it's, oh, no, we need the next slide. Got a little, oh, sorry. Can we go back? Yes. This is one of the wadis in the mountains of the UAE. Did you like those pictures that we're showing behind Laila's speech? Every single one of those is something that we find here in the UAE. So I don't know how many of you are from outside of the UAE. Can you put your hand up if you don't live here? A few of you. When you were thinking about coming to the UAE for the first time, were you thinking about pictures like that, about these gorgeous water pools and wildlife? Probably not, right? But the UAE does have amazing nature, and the desert as well is not a wasteland, it's a very valuable habitat. So did you know that you can actually measure your connection to nature? So eco-psychologists around the world have created this series of short questions that if you answer them, we give you a score out of a percentage of how connected to nature you are. So that's the next slide. Hopefully my clicker's working. Oh, the video's working. That's lovely. Look at this dragonfly in the background. We love dragonflies. Dragonflies have 360-degree vision, and they can eat huge numbers of mosquitoes. So we particularly like them. Take care of dragonflies when you see them. Okay, so have a quick scan of this QR code, and I'll give you a second to just work out how connected to nature you are. You'll get a score. I would like everyone to do it, if you've got a phone. No pressure. I need to get out of the way, okay. It's anonymous, so even if you know me, I can't tell, so be honest. It's not homework. This is real. So it's just 6 questions. And so when it comes to your connectedness to nature on a psychological scale, on one side of the scale you have humans are superior, we can engineer our way out of any issue, we are above nature, we can change it however we want. And on the other side of the scale you have I am nature, anything that I do to nature to damage it damages myself. So those are the 2 ends of the scale. Let's see where you fall. I can see you're all busily. I'll give you a second to think. %, up here at the front. Should hope so, Laila. You're the Director General for the UAE's environmental charity. Anyone else want to shout out your scores? Anyone got their score yet? Go on, Andy. How much did you get? 26. All right, you need to join our program for sure. What was that? 71. Well done, well done. 49. 84. 92. Oh my gosh. Well done, Tamara. Proud of you, proud of you. Ghada, what was your percentage? 100, amazing. Okay, well, even if you are at 100%, there's still a lot of fun you can have connecting more with nature. So Laila briefly mentioned our program, Leaders of Change. And Leaders of Change is really that community of nature lovers here in the UAE, and not just people who love nature, but people who want to protect nature, who want to learn more, who want to get out in the field with our scientists, who want to be a part of this initiative that we're talking about today as well, Notice Nature. It's very exciting. We have over 100 events every year. We're a busy team. And you see some of these pictures. These are some of our trips. So did you know that scorpions glow under UV light? Anyone know that? And that's how we survey them. So we go into the desert at nighttime and we look for scorpions, we find snakes sometimes, we find beetles, geckos, all sorts of exciting things. That's called Nature at Night. We put you to work at Leaders of Change, but in a good way. We get you to help us restore the mangroves, but not just plant the mangroves, also measure their growth. So that tree that you've planted, is it actually growing? Is it actually absorbing that carbon dioxide that we need it to? We're building foliage systems up in the mountains. Anyone know what a foliage is? Only one hand there. Do you guys know what a foliage is? It's an ancient irrigation, style of irrigation channel, and it was used historically to take water to the farms and to the villages, but these days, people tend to use pumps and pipes, and what that means is that the wildlife can't access that water. So historically, there used to be these open channels that were like streams, but now all the water's kept in a pipe. And also, if you've got a pump, you're extracting more water than nature can cope with. So we're restoring these ancient foliage systems, and that means things like those dragonflies that are eating all of the pests. Birds can come and access that water, and then they're like pooing on the farm and fertilizing it. So foliage systems are very nature positive. So we've been working with farmers to do that. So I really do encourage you to join Leaders of Change. Go to the next one. So another part of Leaders of Change, which Laila briefly mentioned, was citizen science. So citizen science, in case you haven't heard of it, has anyone heard of citizen science? Some of you, but some of you know. Well, I'm going to wave my magic wand now. You're all scientists. Congratulations, you can put it on your CV. All right, so essentially, citizen science uses the concept that you don't have to have a PhD to be doing science. There's certain elements of the work that we do as scientists that aren't very hard, that you could do just with your smartphone, that you can do as a regular person. And my job actually is to design ways for citizen scientists to come and help us with our research that we do out in the mountains. And my journey with citizen science, and I apologize to my team who've heard this story a million times, but my journey with citizen science is quite long, but the really significant moment came when I was working on a beach in Abu Dhabi, and my job was to protect turtles, critically endangered hawksbill turtles. Now, these turtles are reptiles. They live in the sea, but they breathe air. So when they crawl up the beach to lay their eggs, if that nest is too close to the sea and the water goes over the nest, all of those baby turtles, those critically endangered baby turtles, drown. So one of the things I needed to do was sometimes move the nests higher up the beach. And it's quite a tricky job because baby turtles, when they're in their egg, their embryo attaches to the shell within 9 hours. So you have to move the eggs very carefully, and you have to move them very quickly. So I used to get up extremely early. All my friends were very tired of me going to bed at 8 p.m. and waking up at 4 a.m. I was no fun for a whole of the turtle nesting season. My job was to walk along the beach, find these nests, check if they needed moving, and move them. And each turtle nest has up to 100 eggs in it. So if I manage to save a turtle nest, that's 100 individuals of a critically endangered species. And we think there's only 200 nesting females left in the Arabian Gulf. So that was a big deal. So I would do this every day, walking along the beach, checking for turtle nests. Then my brother decided to marry my best friend in the middle of the turtle nesting season in England. So I was like, great, thanks guys. Do I save the turtles or do I go to the wedding of my brother and my best friend? What should I have done? What should I do? You guys are all nature lovers. Most people say go to the wedding. What I did was I realized there's a lot of people in the community who really care about nature, really cared about turtles, that have very sophisticated, essentially, computers in their pocket with GPS, with cameras, with the ability to zoom me from the middle of the wedding and be like, what do I do with this turtle nest? Is this a turtle nest? So I went to the wedding, but I trained up my mates on how to deal with a turtle nest if they found one. And that's citizen science. They just learn how to do a small piece of the puzzle, and they saved the day and let me go to a wedding. It was great. So citizen science is something that we're going to do today. We've got a field trip after this talk, remember? And what we're going to be doing today is citizen science to notice nature, to notice the small things as well as the big things when we're walking around Expo. We're going to find some wildlife. And this is all part of our new initiative with Mashrik. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Kartik from Mashrik, who's going to talk to us a little bit about why at Mashrik they think investing in nature is so important. So over to you. We've got the mic.
Hi, everyone. I'll try to be brief. At Mashrik, we are all very excited about the future and the opportunity to leave the planet in better shape for the future generations. And that's manifested in some of the things that we are doing, such as climb to change. I think the theme for today in my head is that everyone can contribute. And so as a point where we thought we could contribute, the change that we made was that we said we will use 100% recycled plastic for all our plastic cards, right? That's one. The second thing we did was we said if somebody wants to get a Mashrik card, they should be able to do it without printing anything, without submitting any paper. So we did that. And when we send out communications to our customers, we were using a lot of paper in that, so we minimized the paper that we send. Everything is electronic. Even the card that comes to you, the card carrier is minimized. It's just a very small envelope made of recycled paper with a QR code in it, where you can go on the web and check out anything that you would like to see about the terms and conditions or what benefits you're getting and when is the gift coming, right, and so on. But that's not all. If you look at the newly redesigned cards that we have, every card is telling a story, and that story is about one part of the ecosystem that we are in. And inside the intricate designs of the plastics that we are sending you, you will find one element of the ecosystem that we are trying to protect and rehabilitate. And in that sense, Mashrik and we are thrilled to partner with Emirates Nature WWF on Notice Nature towards making sure that everyone can contribute and that we are playing a role, we are playing a part to rehabilitate and protect nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, what is this Notice Nature thing that we're trying to do? What are we trying to do? We're going to invite you. Everybody can do it. Doesn't matter how old you are, what your job is, where you are in the world even. Everybody can help us collect information about nature. And when we collect information about nature, we have a better understanding of how healthy it is, where species are moving. Are there changes as a result of climate change? Are we seeing species for the first time in an area we haven't seen them before? So we need information about the different species to know if they need help. So we're in the business of protecting nature, of conservation, but if I don't know if something needs conservation or not, I can't do it, right? So we need information. Information about what biodiversity there is helps us to protect it. So we need to reverse this loss of nature. As we've all determined, we are nature, we need nature, so we need to take care of it. What we're trying to do is get some research-grade observations into a database, and you can absolutely help us with that. I'm going to give you a training in a minute. It's going to get serious. You're going to have to do some learning. So we're trying to get 5,000 new research-grade observations. And this will help us have the information that we need to protect areas of high biodiversity. We'll work out where most of the stuff is living, and then we can advocate to protect those areas. So we're trying to make sure that 30% of the land and 30% of the sea is protected by 2030. So, how are you going to do that? There's an app. There's an app for everything, right? Now there's an app to map biodiversity. There's an app called iNaturalist. And I would love for you to get your phones out again. There's a free Wi-Fi, plug-and-play free Wi-Fi. And go on to whichever app store you have. I didn't put the QR code up this time because I know there's all sorts of different app stores. And search for this word, iNaturalist. So iNaturalist is a very powerful tool that uses the incredible machine in your pocket that has GPS, it has time and date, it has a really high definition camera, and it can help us map the biodiversity. So you need to get this app. And then once you've got the app, I'll give you a second to do that. I'm monitoring who's downloading the app. Oscar definitely already has it. Drew's probably got some of the highest number of observations in the UAE. All right, so hands up when you finished downloading the app, or if you've already got it. Well done. Very good. Can you guess I used to be a teacher? Okay, so everyone's got iNaturalist now. So what you need to do is go and find our project. It's called Notice Nature UAE. And let me show you how to do that. So in the app, there should be a little, can you see? There should be a little icon that says projects. So you need to go to click that. Oh, if you can go back. Oh, yeah, okay, click projects. And then you need to type in and search Notice Nature UAE and find that project and join it. Once you've joined that project, I can see all of your observations, and I can go in and I can help you identify the things you've seen, and we can keep track of how much is being recorded. So Notice Nature UAE, and then these are all the species that we've already found within the project that we've been trialing already. So we've already got 506 species that we've mapped as a community. Yay! And 2,314 observations. So we've got some already there, and with your help, we're going to get more and more. Okay, how are we doing? Has everyone joined the project? Debs is shaking her head. Okay. What are you stuck on? Good job. Amazing. So once you've joined the project, everything will automatically go in there. You don't have to tag it to the project every time. Do we need to go back? Are you stuck on the... You're good? Okay, so once you've joined the project, then you can start to explore. So if you're going to a new area, and you want to find out what kind of wildlife is in this area. What have people been seeing in this area? You can go to the Explore section and just zoom in on your map and press Search the Area. And then you see all of these pins. Those are species that have been identified here at Expo already. And we're gonna do some more later. So, are you ready to learn how to upload your own observations? Yeah? So you find that picture of Observe, and you'll see a screen like this. So maybe you've already taken a picture and you just want to upload something from your photo roll, or you can do it live, the camera in the app at the same time. So you can choose which one you want to do. You can even record sounds. If you hear an interesting bird sound, you can record the sounds. So you click, I normally do photo library because then I can take loads of pictures and I can zoom in, I can edit them to make it more clear. But then I upload on site. So then you click the photo library, you choose your image, and it should do something. Ooh. Great. Then you find your wildlife. So this is the Arabian dwarf red honeybee. Arabian red dwarf honeybee. You got that? The Arabian red dwarf honeybee. It's the local bee species. It does make honey, but it's not normally used by the beekeepers because they like to be in open spaces. They don't like to be confined indoors. A bit like me, really. I need to be outside as much as possible. But they make honey, and the wild captured honey is very, very highly prized. Lovin has a question. Why is it the red dwarf honeybee? So they're about half the size of the normal honeybee, of the commercial honeybees. And they've got this little red bottom. And you see those white bits on its leg. That's the pollen that it's collected, and it's storing it in its pollen pockets. So I've seen tons of these today, and I'm going to challenge you guys to try and find one later on today. So this was a bee that I took a picture of. So I've uploaded it into my observation. Now, one of the coolest things about iNaturalist is that all of these observations that are going into this database, you have images that are tagged to the species name. Now, all of that data, all of those images that are tagged to species names, we live in the amazing age of AI and machine learning. The machines can reverse that process. So once you upload something, iNaturalist can guess what you've seen. It's like Shazam for nature. So, but we need as many accurate images with their species as possible for the machine to learn, right? And one of the things that's happening here in the UAE is that our species are quite specific to this area, and there's not quite enough data in the system for that image recognition to be really strong. So we need more and more observations so that that system is as strong as possible. So as you see, I uploaded in, I asked it, what did you see? And it got to honeybee, but it didn't know which species of honeybee. So I used a field guide that we've prepared that you'll be able to use today when we go on our field trip. But it doesn't matter if you don't get it quite right, because one of the other amazing things about iNaturalist is that the community come in and they verify if your ID is correct or not. And even us as a team at Emirates Nature WWF, and especially Drew's very good at this, actually. Thanks, Drew, for all those identifications you've done on my stuff. Drew will go in and he'll fix your ID if you've got it wrong, or he'll change it. So unless you've had someone else verify the species, it's not considered a research grade observation. So we know which ones are accurate and which ones aren't. So we know that this was the red dwarf honeybee. So I just typed the name. It is generally better, if you know it, to use the scientific name. So we've got two names there, right? The red dwarf honeybee and Apis florea. Why do we have this difficult to pronounce scientific name? Anyone know?
Name of the person who discovered them? One part of it.
Sometimes, not always, actually. Although, fun fact, Dr. Drew, who's coming on the stage later, has 3 species named after him. We have a scientific name. Anyone else want to guess why we have a scientific name? Latin. It's in Latin, it's sometimes in Greek. But why do we need these annoying, difficult to pronounce names? To unify it, yeah. So I'm sure there's a different name for the species in the local dialect. There's probably a different name for the species in whatever languages you guys speak. I'm British and terribly bad at languages, so I only know English. But even in English, sometimes we call them different things, right? So there's different names for the same thing. So it is better to try and use a scientific name if you can, and you'll find the species more easily. So you tag the species. Then we need to know when you saw it, because if you saw a bee at nighttime, that's weird. Maybe there's something going on with the pesticides that are confusing their sense of night and day. That's a thing, by the way. Neonicotinoids cause the bees to get confused about what's night and what's day, and then they get lost. So we don't want the bees to be out at nighttime. So we want to know the time and the date. Also, interestingly, are we seeing bees in the summer when it's really, really hot? Or are we seeing them only in the winter? This sort of information is very useful for scientists to be able to protect them. So you put in the time and date. If you're doing this live, it's super easy because it will just automatically give you the exact time and date that you're in right now. But you can go and use historical sightings as well. If you've got a really good camera with a big lens, sometimes we do that, the uploads a bit later. So you've got to put in the time and date. And then you've got to do the location. So again, these brilliant smartphones that we all have very accurate GPS. So you can easily just click this little green arrow in the corner, and that will just navigate to where you are. And boom, there you go. You've got your location. It's so easy. I believe in all of you. So once you've done that, you've then got your species uploaded and you're a scientist. Do you reckon you can do it? Yes, I think you can. I think you can. So here we go. Here was the bee that I saw at Expo just yesterday. And then you're on the map. Your observation is contributing to global biodiversity studies. There might be someone based in like California who's studying bees who's just interested to know about UAE bees, and your sighting could be something that they're using in their research. There's thousands of research papers that have been published as a result of this data. So it's super, super cool. So we've mapped this biodiversity. Hooray! But we want to increase the biodiversity as well. We don't just want to look at it. I mean, we do want to look at it, but we want to increase it. We want to have more and more. So I'm going to invite onto the stage my colleague, Dr. Andrew Gardner, and we're going to have a little chat about how we can increase biodiversity in our gardens, in our wild areas around us. So Drew, please do come up on the stage. We can have a sit down. Great. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks. It's a great event.
Oh, good. So, Drew, we're all dying to know. We've been busy out there recording all our species that we see, maybe in our gardens, maybe in the parks, maybe out when we're hiking, that kind of thing. What can anyone that's sitting here today do to increase biodiversity in the areas that they live in or they visit?
Well, most of us, of course, live in the cities. Most of us live in flats or maybe a villa with a bit of garden. And wherever you live, there are things that you can do to really increase biodiversity. First, I'd just like to say how important biodiversity is, even in the urban environment, in the cities. You know, as Arabella says, we are all part of nature. We are basically animals that have evolved in nature over millions of years, and it's really hardwired into our brains that we are part of nature. We need nature psychologically. And I'm sure most of you will have felt that when you go out into a beautiful natural environment, stress just kind of drifts away and you really feel relaxed and at one with your environment. And this is something that even in the city is really important. Now, when you open your window in the morning and there's a bulbul or a sunbird singing outside somewhere, or just the doves cooing, that also helps. It helps psychologically. We all need this. And we all should really try our best to get out into nature. It doesn't matter if you don't know what the species are or anything. Just get out and experience nature is really, really important. So what about nature in the cities and what can we do? It really is, I mean, even looking around here, you can see greenery pretty much everywhere. And our city planners, you know, do understand this to a certain extent anyway, and are planting trees and so on. But there's some areas, of course, in the city which particularly maybe in more high-dense housing areas or industrial areas which have very little greenery. And one thing that is has been shown is that those areas are what are called heat islands. They actually heat up. The concrete, the tarmac, absorbs the heat from the sun and keeps it and then radiates it out so that those areas can be, particularly on a still night, for example, can be 3 or 4 degrees hotter than in kind of greener areas. Really showing the importance of having greenery in the city. A city like Al Ain, for example, which has been really well planted and is actually much greener than the surrounding desert, of course, actually is cooler than its environmental areas. So if you live in the city and you have garden space, it's really important to plant it up as much as possible. Now, of course, water is precious. So planting with water, with water-friendly plants, if you like, which don't need much water, is important as well. And that often comes to be our natural plants, the plants which are adapted here to living in nature. So if you have a garden, I would recommend that you rewild the garden a little bit. Don't spend too much time picking up the dead leaves, for example, because those dead leaves which fall on the ground are habitats for biodiversity. Insects, spiders, even lizards can live in those habitats. And you know, you've made a little nature reserve, in a sense, in your garden. Plant things like the gaff tree, if you have space for it in your garden. The gaff tree is a fantastic tree. It's the UAE's national tree. It doesn't require much water. It is attractive for bees. It's a beautiful tree as well. It has flowers at a certain time of year. Or the Arabian moringa tree, which is a native tree from our mountains here. It doesn't just need to grow in the mountains, though. It grows very, very well in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and our cities, and doesn't need much water. It produces beautiful flowers in the springtime, which the bees love. And it's a very attractive tree as well. It's kind of a feathery tree. It doesn't grow too big, you know. So plant things like that. You can also, at some of our nurseries, actually get other native plants, such as some of the ground cover plants and some of the native grasses. And by planting these, you're actually attracting nature, providing a home for nature. Now, what if you don't have a garden, which actually is probably most of us? What can you do then? Well, if you have a balcony, you can use that as a little garden. And I would certainly recommend using that to actually grow some food, maybe, particularly herbs, which are really easy to grow. Things like basil and thyme, and maybe even rosemary, or maybe even tomatoes. And if you grow something like basil, it grows well. You can harvest it for its leaves and use it for cooking, obviously. But once it's grown a little bit more, it'll start flowering, and some people will then throw it out and grow a new one. But don't do that. Leave it to flower. The flowers are beautiful, and the bees love them. So, again, you're making a little nature reserve, and something that actually is good for your soul, if you like, by being able to see the bees or the butterflies coming to these flowers. So do that. In many parts of the world, in the urban environment, there are community gardens. And I think this is something which I would hope would be the future in places like Dubai and Abu Dhabi, where there is urban space which people living in the area can use to maybe grow vegetables or to grow flowers or whatever, or plant trees. And again, this is something that's really valuable. Of course, here it's a little bit more difficult than some places because you need to water them quite a lot. But you know, it's well worth doing. It really is. And the other thing, of course, is to actually get out into nature. Get out into the desert. Get out into the mountains. Go hiking. Go and have picnics. And experience nature. Look at the animals and plants. And while you're doing so, whip out your phones and do some iNaturalist data collection for us. As Arabella says, this is actually really, really important. You don't need to know what the organism is. You see a butterfly, you don't need to know the name of it. You can take a photo, put it on iNaturalist. The AI may identify it. It may actually get it wrong sometimes, or it may not. But then we look at these things and we try, if we can identify them, we will. And once it's identified, it becomes a research-grade data point. That's a bit of data where we know the species was there in this exact locality at this time of day and on this particular day of the year. And that is a lot of information, and it's really important information. Worldwide, I don't know what the total of records is on iNaturalist now. iNaturalist has been going for about 15 years or something, I think. But it is hundreds of millions of data points. And as Arabella says, these are used by scientists in publications, that's used by governments for looking at distributions of plants. And in many cases, even new species have been discovered by citizen scientists taking a photo of something. They don't know what it is, but it's, it's something nice. Take a photo, put it on there, and somebody's come along and said, well, I don't know what that is. And they've looked at it, and it's, it could be a completely new species for science even. So do this, particularly, around your house, your flat, your environment, and particularly when you go out in the desert or you go out into the mountains and you see something. Just spend a few minutes doing this. If you collect just a few observations, take insects. Birds are a little bit more difficult with a phone camera because it's a bit difficult to get close to them. But if you have another camera with a zoom lens, take it. Or even if you are using your phone camera, very often, by the time you zoom in, there's actually a good enough image to identify that species. When you are doing it, take a little bit of time to try to get the best photo that you can. And I think as part of our Leaders of Change, we need to actually run some workshops on nature photography, in particular phone nature photography, because the phone is actually a really, really good camera. And just with a little bit of care and a little bit of knowledge, you can get fantastic images. Even by doing this, I'm sure some of you will then actually get hooked on the photography thing, and share them on social media, spread the love of nature. Really important. Okay, I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Drew. There you go. Drew has prescribed you picnics. You have to go out into nature and have a picnic. Yeah. I was Googling what we can do to increase urban biodiversity, and I found this image behind me. This is a bug hotel. Could you talk to us a bit about that, and is that something we should be doing here in Dubai as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Bug hotels are designed for certain kinds of insects which like to live in or make their nest and live in these confined spaces. So it's usually a series of bamboos or even a block of wood with holes drilled in it, where particularly things like solitary bees can nest and live their lives there. So it's encouraging certain insects which like this kind of habitat. And bee hotels are something you can make yourself, or you can get your kids to make as a school project. Easy to do. In many parts of the world, other things that people are doing are putting up bird nesting boxes or even bat nesting boxes. In Australia, where I've been living, people put up possum boxes and things. So because in our environment, particularly in the kind of urban environment, things like trees which have hollows for animals, maybe birds or mammals or whatever, to nest in, are increasingly rare. By the time a tree develops holes into it, often people come along and say, oh, that tree's getting dangerous. It might fall over and land on someone's car or something, and it gets removed, which removes a particular habitat, which is really important. But by putting up bird boxes, so birds which nest in holes, normally nest in holes in trees, they have a place where they can live. So same is true for bats, same is true for some of the small mammals, and even some of the insects. And in fact, many times people put bird boxes up, you suddenly find that the bees come along and think, oh, that's a good place to have a little beehive, and they'll invade it as well. But never mind. And that's something I will just say, and if you do have a garden, and these little dwarf red honeybees come along and build a nest in your tree, don't call the municipality to remove it or anything. They're actually really nice to have in your garden. These bees, they'll sting if you try and grab one, but their stings, they're very small bees. Their stings are much weaker than in the commercial kind of honeybees. They generally can't sting through clothing, for example, and they're not aggressive anyway, and they're really interesting to watch.
Thank you so much. So we've got a few minutes now for any questions for Dr. Drew. Does anyone have any specific questions they would like to ask? Lovin's had 2 questions already today, so I'm going to go with Ahmed Abu Samra. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Good. I just want to ask something that, we always kind of talk about the importance of having insects and how they're really important for biodiversity as a whole. But then there's also the other kind of point of aspect when, people generally don't really react well to insects. They really want to get rid of it and it's disgusting. So how do you kind of bridge that barrier and kind of educating people? And at the same time, how do you make it actually, enjoyable or something to kind of observe or people to appreciate? So what we recommend about that? Yeah.
You're right. I mean, many people don't like insects, and in a sense, sometimes this may be cultural or just people think bugs. They think of mosquitoes. They think of flies. They think of wasps, and these kind of things. And it's true. They are a nuisance. You don't like flies buzzing around you and not getting onto your food and things. So not all insects, I guess, are super attractive and interesting. But biodiversity, benefits everyone. And even these kind of animals have their place in the great scheme of things. Bees, just to go back to bees, for example, I mean, a lot of people don't like bees because they're scared of them and they think they're going to sting them and so on. But bees are absolutely critically important in our environment in that they pollinate plants, both the natural plants that we see outside in the mountains and deserts, and also our crop plants and our trees and so on, the mangroves even. Without bees, the mangroves don't produce viable seeds, and after one generation, they're gone, basically. We have to have the bees to pollinate. And if we think about it, all food chains in our environment begin with plants. And the plants support the animal life. But without those plants, there is nothing. There is no life. And those plants are all dependent on bees and many other kinds of insects to pollinate them. So in agriculture, for example, by spreading insecticides around, even in our gardens, killing all of these animals, we're actually really doing ourselves and nature a disservice. We need some of those animals. Other animals, one particular one here, for example, and one which is very dear to my heart, are the geckos. And geckos are the little lizards that we sometimes see in our houses climbing up the walls. Those are just a few species, but in the UAE we actually have about 22 species of geckos, many of them living in the mountains and in the deserts. Geckos, many people don't like them. They don't like them on their walls, and they will try and kill them or whatever. But those geckos actually are really helpful. They're eating mosquitoes, and so they're a little kind of a natural insecticide around your house, eating mosquitoes and flies. So really look after them and enjoy them. They're actually quite cute.
I'm going to cheerlead you for a second there, Drew. Drew has his own gecko, the Gardner's leaf-toed gecko. So if you're out in the mountains, you might spot Drew's gecko. He's one of the world's leading experts on geckos, so dear to his heart was an understatement. We've maybe got time for one more question? Sure, go ahead. Where's the mic gone?
Doctor, hello?
Hi.
Yeah. Doctor, I am very curious to know, we all have heard of Miyawaki forests. Do you see there is a possibility of growing such forest in this part of the world? And second question is, how do you think they can be scaled up in, say, every city, in every region of the world? Because they are very good, they just become independent and they grow on their own without any extra work. They become self-sustaining and they grow very fast.
Yeah, a really nice question. I suspect most of us haven't heard of Miyawaki forest, actually. But let me explain a little bit about what that is. Miyawaki forest is named after a Japanese botanist who devised, about 40 years ago, devised a way of planting forests, often in urban areas, which grow really quickly. And the way that he recommended to plant these is to firstly use the native trees from that environment, because they're the ones which are, if you like, adapted to that environment and to those particular environmental conditions. And he recommends planting trees densely, so not just one here and one there and so on, planting a dense kind of arrangement, and not just the trees, but also the shrubs which would maybe grow under the trees. And of course, to start with, these have to be looked after until they get established. But once they get established, they tend to grow really quickly and form a dense forest, if you like, or not just a forest, but a dense ecosystem with the trees and the other plants which are there. Another kind of thing you can do is actually encourage the soil to have the right kinds of fungi, for example, which also encourage the growth of the trees. Now, here in the UAE, it's a little bit more difficult because, firstly, it's very hot, it's a desert environment, and it's more difficult to establish trees. But if you look around in our environment, you will see native trees, like gaff trees, for example, or the samar, which is the umbrella thorn, growing outside, and nobody's watering them. You know, they're surviving on their own. And these trees can do that. If you look around Dubai, you'll see the broom bush, which is another, not really a tree, but quite a dense bush, growing in many places. No one's watering them. They grow on their own. And so it is certainly possible to establish, using these kind of techniques, establish a forest. And I think this is something that we at Emirates Nature actually, you know, have at the back of our minds as a future project that we would like to, you know, maybe get involved with. Because, as I said, you know, these kind of green spaces, natural spaces in city environments are really important as a cooling thing, for one thing, to break up the kind of heat islands, but also for biodiversity and also as a natural place where people can enjoy. So it is more difficult here, but I'm sure it is possible. There are ways of establishing trees here which do not require irrigation lines. One of these ways is actually using something called a water cocoon, which is it's a plastic reservoir which you bury in the soil. You put in maybe 20 liters of water, and you plant your tree inside in a hole within this reservoir. And the reservoir's got a little wick which puts a small amount of water into the ground for the roots of the tree. It's not enough water so the tree just relies on it. In order for it to grow, it has to grow deeper and put its roots deeper down to try to find the groundwater. So that you only need to have, and it also collects rainwater or anything like that as well with a specially designed lid. So as long as there's a little bit of rain or dew or fog moisture, you probably may only need to fill it up once to start with. And if there's a long period of drought, maybe after 3 months, you might need to put a bit more water into it. But it doesn't need regular irrigation. And the tree is not relying on groundwater irrigation on the surface. It's actually putting its roots down. So that after maybe a couple of years, you should be able to take the water cocoon away, and the tree should be able to live on its own. So there are ways. So it's, yeah, a nice question. Thank you.
And just an extra point for that one, some people might have had an allergic reaction to the word plastic. They can be used up to 10 times, so it is reusable plastic.
It is, yeah.
All right, we have maybe one more question. I can see some little ones down there who have a question. Do you want to go ahead? Yeah?
There we go. No. Go ahead.
What type of new species of animals did you discover that's new to science?
Good question.
Ooh, that's new to science. Well, you know, as I said, I like geckos. So I have found species of geckos which are new to science. In fact, I think at least 4 of them in this part of the world which are completely new to science. It's quite difficult to find new species now. But one of those, I'll tell you the story of how I found it. I was camping in the mountains of Oman, and it was I think it was a kind of springtime. It was a really nice temperature, so I went out with a friend to look for geckos and see what was living in the environment, and found these little geckos and said, well, I don't recognize those. I've never seen that species before. And so I actually collected a couple of them and took them back to the lab and looked up all the books and stuff and couldn't find them. So I thought, well, that's really strange. You know, possibly it's a species which is found maybe in Iran or something that's also in these mountains. So I looked there, but couldn't find it. So I sent the geckos to the Natural History Museum in London to an expert there who really knows even more than I do about geckos to see if he recognized them. And he said, no, these are completely new. This is a new species to science. And so once you've done that, what has to actually happen is you have to write a very detailed description. When I discovered that one, this was before we used DNA as well. Nowadays, if someone finds a new species, they have to describe exactly what it looks like and how many scales there are and how many, what the size is and how long its legs are and all of that kind of stuff. But also analyze its DNA as well, so you can find out what other species it's related to and things. So it's quite a process. But having said that, things like the insects, even here in the UAE, are not very well known at all. And I think projects which are actually catching insects or even photographing insects with iNaturalist stand a much higher chance of actually finding new species. There was a project here which ran, I think, about, must have been about 10 years ago now, where traps to catch insects were put out all around the Emirates for a few years, and the man who was doing this and sent off these specimens that he was collected to experts on ants, an expert on dragonflies, an expert on certain kind of moths and so on, in museums all around the world. And I can't remember exactly how many new species this project found, but it was well into the hundreds of completely new species to science. So there are lots of new species out there.
Yeah, especially insects. And one of my favorite stories I heard about someone who found a type of fly in Australia that had evolved without wings, so it couldn't fly, so it was called a walk. True story. All right, so I could listen to Drew talk all day, but we are unfortunately out of time. So let's have a huge round of applause for Dr. Drew Gardner. Yes, thank you so much, Drew. Okay, I'm out of time, but I promised you a field trip. So what we're going to do, I've got some fantastic volunteers. They're wearing shirts like this or black shirts with the little Emirates Nature WWF badge. They're going to head out just in front of the sign here, the Extreme Hangout sign, and we're going to go in groups. I'm going to go to, hopefully Drew can join us. Yes, in a minute. I'm not quite finished. So we're going to go and we're going to take part in this mission to notice nature. Are you ready? Yay! Okay, so I want you to go and have a look, go for a walk, try and find some urban wildlife. See how many different types of creatures you can find. We'll give you sort of half an hour. You can stay doing it for as long as you like. Take some photos of those wild things that you find and make a note of the location, date, and time. So there's a really important word here, which is wild, and very quickly we're going to play a game of wild or not wild, okay? You guys ready with the slides? Because we're going to go through fast on this one. Okay, so first, wildlife only. Wild or not wild? Next. Wild or not wild? Not wild. Next. Wild or not wild? Next. Wild or not wild? Next. Wild or not wild? Depends. It could be someone's own goat, or it could be a feral goat, which is a goat that's escaped and is living wild. So it could be. That was a trick one. Wild or not wild? Not wild. The trick is, you see in the corner there, you can see the irrigation pipes. So we don't want to be taking too many pictures of things that are not wild, yeah? Okay, next. Wild or not wild? So I guess the tree is wild, the dog is not wild. Next. Wild or not wild? Wild. Next. Wild or not wild? Wild. Next. Wild or not wild? Wild. Next. Oh, there we go. Okay, that was the end. So you're trained, huh? What if he's in a park? This was in the mangroves, actually, so this one is definitely wild. Okay, so that's it. We are going to join some of our Leaders of Change volunteers. They're all holding these little field guides, so you can spot them. And if you can't stay for the field trip, that's okay, but you must join our Leaders of Change program. You can follow this QR code here to find the website. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry to Extreme Hangout for running over time. We're going to just do a quick group photo with all the speakers. Where's Kartik gone? There he is.